Well, continuing today's coverage for you here on Newzroom Afrika and on the Pulse about the US elections. Let's speak now to two people who are from the Republican Party in the US. Anthony Hemstad is from Mainstream Republicans of Washington. He's in the US Capitol in the morning US time, our afternoon. And Professor Pinchas Mandell is in Israel. He's the chairman of IsraelForTrump.org. Well, Mr. Hemstad, if I may just start with you, what is a mainstream Republican?
What is a mainstream Republican? In some ways, it's a pre-Trump Republican, much more like the Mitt Romney wing of the party. Mitt Romney was the nominee prior to Donald Trump, but standing for things like strong ties with our international allies, free trade, fiscally conservative, trying to keep the deficit down. But that's mainstream, trying to build a very big tent political party.
Okay, so I mean, the classic case would probably be the first President Bush.
Yes, very much so. He is almost the epitome of the mainstream Republican. You're correct.
Would you say then, as a mainstream Republican, which is the sort of role that you're speaking to us in, would you say that Donald Trump has changed the Republican Party?
I think he's fundamentally changed the Republican Party, at least for the time being. On all those points that I just mentioned. Working very closely with American democracies overseas and our allies, being free trade, being fiscally conservative. Trump has really flipped that, and both on policy and also on style. I mean, if you think of George Bush or Mitt Romney, they're almost country club Republicans. They're very genteel, they're empathetic. They've spent their whole life focused on civic engagement and public policy. Donald Trump is almost the polar opposite on all those points, frankly.
Professor Mandell, I mean, why is Donald Trump the right person? I mean, I'm sitting in South Africa. I've got to tell you, if there was an opinion poll tomorrow, Donald Trump would not be top of mind. Why for you is Donald Trump the right man?
Well, number one, let's start with the fact that he's neither a Democrat or a Republican. Just as myself, Israel for Trump is a grassroots, really nonpartisan, even though we're working in collaboration with the Republicans overseas, Israel. But because he's not a politician, he kept his promises. His style may not be for everybody, but he gets the job done. He's one of the hardest working presidents in my lifetime that I've ever seen. And for Israel, he's the only president who has kept his promises to Israel. Not just to the American people, because I'm both an American citizen and an Israeli citizen, but for Israel, he kept every promise. He was the only one who actually moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, Israel's eternal capital, and all the other promises that he's come through on. So we're voting for Donald Trump, the man, not the politician, because he himself states, I am not a politician. I'm an American. A patriotic, proud American. And, his style is definitely very different, but it seems to be very effective because he gets things done, just as he did when he was a businessman. And if you think about it, the President of the United States is the CEO of the largest corporation in the world. Of course, he inherited a corporation with lots of problems, both internal and external. And it's not easy. He will need another 4 years to finish draining the swamp, as that's a promise he made that he still hasn't been able to fulfill for obvious reasons. So he first needed to know and identify all the swamp creatures in the last 4 years, because they all floated to the top.
Professor Mandell, I mean, I've got to tell you, okay, so you're talking about the President of the United States, and you say that he is not a politician. I mean, I'm going to look in the camera and say this. I'm not a journalist. It doesn't mean just because I say it is not true.
Well, let us redefine that. He is not a career politician, as is Biden, who's been there for 47 years.
I mean,
so,
come on,
what's the difference? I know he had to learn politics. Why? Because why is he so hated? I mean, if you look at the polls or the votes that came in for Washington, D.C., 94% of them voted
Sorry,
for Biden.
Professor Mandell,
So
Professor Mandell,
hatred for the man.
I'm going to ask you to answer a direct question, right? Here's the direct question.
Sure.
You say that he's not a politician. I'm saying to you he's the President of the United States running for a second term. If that's not a definition of a politician, what is?
Okay, well, because, as I said before, he's not a career politician. Of course, he needed to learn the art of politics, obviously, because he is President of the United States, but he does not act as a career politician. I mean, it's kind of a little bit different than being a journalist, because a journalist is not something you intend to do just for 4 years or 8 years. It's something that you take as a career, move, that's something that speaks to your heart and you're passionate about. But being president, is something that you do for a limited time. So, and he didn't come from a background of politics.
Right, Professor.
So, technically, I guess because he is president, you could call him a politician, but he certainly does not act like a politician, because if he did, he, as all politicians before him, presidents, never keep their promises.
All right, Professor Mandell, I'm going to
talk the talk and he walked the walk.
Professor Mandell, I'm sorry, very unjournalistically of me. I'm still learning, obviously, to interrupt you. But, I mean, you say that he's a hard-working president. You say he's a good man. I mean, this is someone who spent more time playing golf than any other president than I can think of the United States. And at the same time, I mean, can you really look your camera in the eye and say that he's someone who tells the truth? Isn't telling the truth something that's important?
You can point out lies to me. I mean, he made lots of campaign promises, and he kept them, whether it was moving the embassy to Jerusalem, whether it was pulling out of the Iran deal, out of the climate deal, out of, NAFTA, out of lots of other deals, with China, the wall, security, the economy, unemployment, so many things that he did accomplish. So if he's doing all that, and as you say, he's spending more time playing golf, then he's a very efficient president.
But you said
if
he
he
was
can accomplish
hard-working.
all those things which are facts. They're facts. They're not, not something it's my theory or my feelings. Right. I don't know how much the ratio of golf games to being in the White House and doing his job is, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating, in the results.
All right. Anthony Hemstad, and I can see on our screens that you've been enjoying part of this interview, but I do need to put a little bit of pressure on you. I mean, you made the point earlier, you're a mainstream Republican.
Good. I'll roll with you.
Professor Mandell, I'm just going to, we've got two guests as part of this conversation. I'm just going to speak to the other guests if you don't mind. Shut up, man. Anthony Hemstad, okay, you're a mainstream Republican. You made the point that Trump had changed the nature of the Republican Party. Why are you still a Republican?
Well, I believe that there's going to be a real fight for the soul of the Republican Party in the future. Either that's happening starting right now if President Trump does not win re-election, or starting in 4 years when he steps down at that point. But the Republican Party, there are many different factions within it, and sometimes they hold directly opposed opinions. There are many evangelicals are in the Republican Party, and there are many libertarians in the party, and they agree on very few things. But in order to be a ruling party in the United States, you need to get to 50%, and you ally together on certain things. I think there could well be a major shakeout with both parties, in that the real energy for both the Democrats and the Republicans are coming from the extremes, from the far left and the far right. But there's a big American political center which more and more is feeling homeless, and that includes many mainstream Republicans, frankly. But there are many moderate Democrats also who aren't feeling in step with with where the strength and energy is in the Democratic Party right now.
Anthony Hemstad, I'm going to put this question to you first, and I'll put it to you, Professor Mandell, in a moment as well. And the question simply is this. There's been some research in the US that shows that Republicans think Democrats are evil and Democrats think Republicans are evil. Anthony, I mean, you're a mainstream Republican. I presume you don't think Democrats are evil, but do you worry about that sort of tension in your country?
Oh, no. I agree completely. And no, I do not think Democrats are evil. And we have to work in a bipartisan way and really try to find commonalities wherever possible. And that is unfortunately happening less and less often right now. And yes, I do worry about it. The United States I've never seen it as polarized as it is today. And unfortunately, there are too many actors who are working to deepen the polarization rather than unite the country.
Professor Mandell, I mean, you're a Trump Republican. Are Democrats evil? Is Joe Biden an evil man?
I wouldn't say, okay, let's talk about good and evil. It's really that the Democratic Party has been hijacked by the extreme radical left, which I know, listen, I was a Democrat. I'm from New York City originally, and 30 some odd years ago when Carter was president, I was a Democrat. But, you know, they kind of went off the track for my case, and then I was neither a Democrat or Republican. The only thing that got me voting again was President Donald Trump. And so I have many friends who are Democrat. I don't think they're evil. I don't think they're bad. You know, they have a lot of good ideals. But right now, it's really, like I said, the Democratic Party has been hijacked by the extreme radicals that are taking it way, way left, communist left, socialistic left, and a lot of Democrats that are classic Democrats are not happy at all, and they don't like the division and the causeless hatred, and for the Republicans too. I know that a lot of Republicans don't think that, you know, Trump is maybe the greatest guy in the world, but he is uniting even the people in the Republic. And I can't say that all the Republicans are behind Trump, because in the Congress, in the Senate and Congress, we've seen that they've not cooperated and collaborated 100%, because, you know, it's politics, which, again, because he's not a career politician, he is not liked by many people in the conventional, you know, Republican Party. But we're, like my colleague said, there is people that he's pulling together that otherwise would not be working together. And commonality is something we definitely need to find and create unity.
So, Professor Mandell, if you were at a Trump rally, would you sing along with the phrase, lock her up, when it came to Hillary Clinton?
No, I'm not. Listen, if someone committed a crime, okay, and there is evidence as such, and you present it to the relevant authority, and they feel they should be arrested and jailed, I leave that to the system. That's why the system is there.
That would apply to Donald Trump.
Apparently the system is not working. It's not working.
You know, in a way, gentlemen, I'm glad that
I wouldn't be shouting that, if that's your question.
Gentlemen, I'm glad in a way that we had this conversation across 3 continents. It somehow made it easier, but one day, maybe, we'll do this in person. Thank you very much indeed. Anthony Hemstad is from Mainstream Republicans of Washington. Professor Pinchas Mandell is the leader, chairman of Israel for Trump. Well, coming up more on the US elections. It's been very, very divisive. We are going to be talking a little bit about some of that divisive language.